Mike Crowley, thank you for doing this podcast with us.
Sure.
Um, I am very happy you accepted my invitation. And let's start with talking about the most obvious thing at the moment, I would say, which is the running across America. Tell us your story.
Yeah, I've actually walked across America twice. The first time was 2019. It was kind of 10 years in coming. It was one of those things that I was never thinking about doing, and it just popped in my head one day. Hey, you're going to walk across the country, And so it came into my head, would leave my head, would come in, leave over the years, and then finally realized that it must be a God thing, right? So the funny thing is, I started planning it about the end of 2016. And then the spring before I left, I said, all right, God, what's this all about? You better tell me, right? And so he told me. And so then off I left in March of 2019 and went from Southern California to Delaware, built my own route from Southern California, from Laguna Beach to Pueblo, Colorado. And then from Pueblo, Colorado, followed the American Discovery Trail to Delaware, and then finished on New Year's Eve, and then did the whole thing again, this time from north to south, Upper Peninsula, Michigan, down to Key West. That started in August of 2020 and finished March of 2021. And so here we are.
A few things already caught my attention. One was the religious aspect that I want to talk more about that for sure, because I think it's interesting. But the other is, you said that you were thinking about it did I get it right? That you were thinking about it for about 10 years?
Yeah.
And then you did it. But during those 10 years, were you a runner at all? Like, what was your background in terms of running, and what was your background in general?
Yeah. So never had a running background. Like I said, these two trips were walks as opposed to runs.
Mm-hmm.
I had done backpacking in the early years of my life. Started when I was in Boy Scouts, and then later on, life got in the way, work got in the way, and then a little bit later on, then I started to back up, but not as much as I liked. And so my background was just basically, doing work. And then in 2009, like I said, just a random thought came into my head, just popped in my head, and you're going to walk across the country. And then that's where it kind of went from there.
And how did you prepare for that?
Well, I didn't think much of it really for the first few years. I didn't really think much of it. And then as the thought would come in more and more, I started just kind of poking around to see if this was a thing. And I saw that it was a thing. And so I started just kind of generally looking at what kind of routes would be out there. Then I stumbled across the American Discovery Trail, and I thought, well, that would be kind of easy to help me plan if I was actually going to do this. But being in Southern California, I decided, well, I didn't want to start up in Northern California. I figured I just want to start from home, just in case I crash and burn at the beginning, right? So it took me the better part of 2 years to actually plan an actual route from Laguna Beach and to find where I wanted to join the American Discovery Trail. So I did that for the better part of 2 years, put together a route that was mostly little 2-lane roads, Route 66, but a good portion of it was trails, like through the Grand Canyon and through the Rockies, but also going through the Navajo Reservation and southern Utah and all that. And then, like I said, I joined the American Discovery Trail in Pueblo. So, like I said, started early March of 2019, and got to the American Discovery Trail in June, and then went from there.
So you walked instead of running, as you said. So how long it took you?
So it was March 6th I started in 2019, and then finished on New Year's Eve of 2019. So just about 9.5 months. And then the second walk, which I started in August 1st of 2020, I finished that March 16th of 2021. So that would be 7.5 months for that walk. First walk was about 3,900 miles. The second walk was about 2,200 miles.
When I did my running after 3 months on the road, the mental fatigue was enormous. Like I really struggle with the I would say the psychological fatigue.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to finish, man, and I have a lot of trouble imagining being on the road for an even longer period.
Yeah, I have two observations on that. On my first trip, the second day out, I was going over this mountain, and all of a sudden I had this, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? This is going to be a long distance. It's so far to walk. I mean, what am I going to do? Oh no. And then I had to stop right then and there and say, no, you got to be right here, right now, live in this moment at this place, and don't think about how far it is ahead. Don't think about what you've done behind, but just be right here, right now. And then that's what carried me, that day-to-day, moment-by-moment thing. Just being in the moment. Yeah. So
yeah, I don't know. I didn't have a problem in the beginning. Physically, yes, but psychologically, I was all right. And through the entire thing, it was just like the last month, I was like so ready to be done with it.
Yeah.
And continue my life, get on with my plans. I was feeling so ready for that, and then I didn't want to be there anymore. So that was a struggle, but it was like during the last month or so. And when I did the second run, I had exactly the same. I had the same problem again on the second one, but then it was even worse.
Oh,
it was more intense. And I don't have any better explanation or better description to this than psychological fatigue of being there doing the same thing. When your life is waiting for you, your everything that you are doing, everything in your life you put on pause, right? It's very much like because you can't work, you cannot do anything. Most people, you don't talk. I was only communicating with a few people that I kept in touch with. I joke that it's similar to being in jail, with the difference that you can get run over.
Yeah.
But at least it's a jail that you put yourself in, so it's you don't feel restricted. But I was really tired. And one thing that I wish I exploited better was using trails instead of using roads. I did a little bit of trail going through the middle of Florida.
Okay.
Maybe you used that one that used to be a railroad.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I used that for a while, and it was very pleasant.
Yeah.
That part is so nice.
Right.
Because you're now worried constantly about cars. It was really great. But the other parts of it, I didn't really find, or even I didn't even search for trails too much. I just tried to find the shortest route. So I could get through
right
sooner. Uh, so you're walking. You didn't do any particularly complex preparation. But what kind of gear did you have? How did you organize your logistics?
Well, couple of questions you asked me there. Gear preparation. So gear is just basic backpacking gear. I have my backpack. I went as ultralight as I could. So I swapped out a number of the things that I had already had, just to get my base weight down. And then logistically, it was just a matter of pinpointing where I could resupply along the route. The first part of the route, basically between Southern California and Pueblo, there were a few places where there were no resupply places. So I had to send boxes ahead to post offices with my food. And then there were a couple places where I had 8 or 9 day carries. I had an 8-day carry through the Grand Canyon, and I had another 8-day carry at the towards the middle of the Navajo Reservation, and I had a 9-day carry up and over the Rockies. And like I said, through that section between Southern California and Pueblo, I had 4 spots where I had to actually send a box ahead to grab my resupplies instead of being able to rely on a store or a convenience store or a gas station.
But when you say that you went through the Grand Canyon, can you explain? Did you go through it, like around it, through the bottom? How did you do that?
Okay, so my route from Southern California was mostly roads until I got to the desert out between 29 Palms and Needles, California.
Mm-hmm.
And between there and Needles, there's a series of dirt roads that you can take. And I actually started out there. Then I got trapped by a little bit of heat. So I backtracked and I actually cheated and got a ride around that section. But most of the western U.S. was between California and northern Arizona was on Route 66. Once I got to Seligman, Arizona, which is between Kingman and Flagstaff, I cut across the Babbitt Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And Babbitt Ranch is about 500,000 acres. And to put that into perspective, that's about 3/4 the size of the state of Rhode Island. So that was basically dirt roads and some cross-country stuff through the ranch there. And then once I got to Grand Canyon, I went down. What was the trail? The Tanner Trail. Went down the Tanner Trail into the canyon to the
Mm-hmm.
bottom, and then went along the Beamer Trail to the Little Colorado River.
Mm-hmm.
Turned up to the Little Colorado River into the Navajo Reservation, and then went up, exited there on the Salt Trail Canyon. And then from there was dirt roads until I hit the 2-lane roads. And then basically walked the 2-lane roads through the Navajo Reservation until I got to Colorado. And then that was the Ute Mountain Reservation, 2-lane roads there. And then I got into Durango, and then Durango, more 2-lane roads until I got up and over the Rockies. So to answer your question about the Grand Canyon, went down the Tanner Trail, followed the Colorado River for about 9 miles, and then turned up the Little Colorado River, and then came up the Salt Trail Canyon into the Navajo Reservation proper. That was tough.
To me, that part sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was. I had the option when I was first planning it. Well, I could go around, but then, I was thinking, no, I want the adventure, It's like, and it was pretty tough, going down. That was going down on the Tanner Trail. That was about 9 miles, but 4,500 feet, and I still hadn't had my trail legs yet. And so at the end of the day, it's kind of like jelly legs. And then the next day was supposed to be only 8 miles, right? And I figured, 8 miles, that'll be just a breeze. But what's happening is you're following the trail, and then it goes down a side canyon about 100 feet, and then up a side canyon about 100 feet, and then I didn't account for that. So I ran out of light and ended up sleeping on the trail that night.
Wow.
Yeah, but once I got to the Little Colorado River, it was pretty straightforward. I did have to ford the river, which wasn't smart, but I did it anyway. And then exiting Salt Trail. Salt Trail Canyon is not really a trail, but it's just marked by cairns, and it's about 3,000 feet vertical and about 3 miles. So it was kind of tough.
The part that when you ford the river, how deep did you have to go to?
Waist high. Yeah. Wasn't smart, and there was quicksand on one side. Yeah, so it was an adventure, to say the least. Yeah,
I did some preparation or testing, let's call it this way, for the second run. That included going and doing the Appalachian Trail in Maine. And we did about, I don't know, like 4 days worth of it. But we did in the part that was the most mountains and we chose like the most difficult. I was doing that with another runner. And I say runner, but we were just walking, and my plan was to just walk the second time. But we chose the most difficult part of the Appalachian Trail that we could find.
Right.
And when we got there, it was July, but it was miserable. It was raining, cold rain the entire time, and no visibility, fog. And we had to cross a few rivers, and that's where we decide, because of that experience, I realized we cannot do this together, because my tolerance for going through difficult situations, like crossing a river that is very narrow and high speed, like I know how to set up the ropes and all that, and we did the crossing, and she was freaking out, and I thought, no, our tolerances for the perception of risk are very different. And that's,
I was thinking from time to time I would think on both of these walks, well, maybe it would be kind of nice to have a hiking partner, but then I would get to thinking, I don't know. I mean, to have a hiking partner, you really have to be matched in your tolerance for risk.
Yeah.
And you really have to be matched in just taking it day by day. And you really have to be matched in being flexible in making the miles or not making the miles for the day. Sometimes out there you see a lot of runners or hikers, and it's all about the miles, all about the miles, all about the miles. And I mean, you got to kind of have that goal when you're doing a through hike like this, but at the same time, I anyway want to have that flexibility. If I want to only do 5 miles for the day, or if I want to take a 0 earlier than a week, then I can do it, or if I want to walk into the night, and speaking of walking in the night, there were a few times in the first walk where I had to actually flip my walk in and walk during the nighttime, just because the heat and the humidity got so much that I had to deal with it that way.
How did that work? Because then you're flipping your circadian cycle, right? Is that? I think that's the name. Yeah, and some people cannot handle that well. How was that for you?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. As an example, the first time I had to do that was in eastern Colorado, just past, I think I was coming into Manzanola. So that day, before I was going to flip, I had to just walk a little bit during the day, rest in whatever shade I had, and try and get a nap. And then that night, start the night thing. And then during the day, find a place to hang out in the shade or in this instance, I found a cheap motel room and did that. And then the second day, same thing. It's hard, because you're flipping just like that, and you're gonna,
When I was in my best shape ever, like in 2012, right after doing my run, in 2011, I decided to do Ragnar, which is a relay race, right? In the miles were not impressive. I just had to do like 24 miles total, divided in 4 parts.
Okay.
So every time you do 4, 5, 6 miles. But because it went overnight, it was in a period of 30 hours.
Oh.
There was almost no sleeping in the middle of it. I felt that brutal. It was, to me, it was one of the most difficult runs I ever did. And and a year later, still in perfect shape, everything really going well, I decided to do a midnight marathon that I organized. We started at midnight from South Beach and we went to Hollywood, Florida. And that is a 26-mile. We chose a place that would be exactly a marathon distance. But I gave up at 24 because I dropped it at 24 because I was sleeping, having dreams while running. I couldn't stay awake. And I thought that was incredibly dangerous. But it wiped me out.
Yeah, it's interesting. The first time I ever did a night hike was way back in Boy Scouts, and we were on a 9-day Sierra trip, and we wanted to have a day off in the middle of the trip. So we did our regular miles for the day, and then after dinner, took a nap. Well, boys being boys, preteen boys being preteen boys, we didn't really take our nap, but we still headed out anyway after dark. And I learned that you can fall asleep while you're walking. It's
incredible, and that's why now I believe so much that people can easily fall asleep while driving. I fell asleep riding a motorcycle for a few seconds, and the motorcycle gradually went off the road, and he had on the edge of the road they had those stuff, I don't know the name of that, but it's then the bike starts shaking, and that woke me up, and I stopped it, and I realized I'm going to kill myself doing this. That was very scary. But running and having dreams, that was scary too.
That the night walking is tough, and I found I really had to take a lot more breaks. And when I took the break, sometimes I would just have to keep myself from falling asleep, And then once dawn started coming, I'm looking forward to getting to that park so that I can at least get a couple hours of sleep and then go hide out in the library or something like that. And so, it just really whacks you out. So, but I only had to do that 3 times, once in Colorado and twice in Kansas, and then after that it was okay, sort of.
I'm impressed by that. I have to tell you, of course we tend to gravitate to talk to other people that did this kind of adventure, and also that is a part of our vocabulary that we share, that gives that feeling of only you can understand what I have been through, right? Which is also common among bikers. It's common among military people, that they have this even if they are not talking about anything related to being at war, just by knowing that the other person has been there too,
Sure.
creates enough connection,
Correct.
to help you feel comfortable. And that's one of the reasons that I love to talk to people like you that that have been there.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, let's say if we were neighbors, right, or if we were living in the same area, and then one day you told me, oh, I want to do this 2 week long walk somewhere, and and you invited me, I wouldn't find that strange.
Right.
I would just look at my calendar and say, all right, I can do it. Let's do it.
Sure.
That it
Yeah.
wouldn't be weird. Uh, but with normal people, if
Uh-huh.
you invite them to go visit someone and it's more than a 15-minute walk,
Yeah.
they look strange at you.
Yeah. Well, also too, people ask you, quote, like you said, quote unquote, normal people, they ask you about the walk. Oh, that seems like a real big thing.
Mhm.
And then I have two answers for that. I tell them, number one, yeah, it can be kind of big, but really it's only a series of single steps, single hours, single minutes.
Mhm.
And so in that sense, it's not a really big thing. And then the second way that I answer it is, especially if they want to hear about it, you get the notion that when they want to hear about it, they don't really figure out really what it's all about. So you can tell them this and that and this and that and this and that, but it doesn't connect in their mind really what that experience was all about.
Yes, I get that impression as well, that I can be answering their questions, but nothing is being absorbed. And I say that not really much as a criticism. It's
Yeah.
just that it's the life that people are in. They are concerned with the mortgage and the job and the car
Mhm.
payments and the other things, and they are when they are talking about this, it's so abstract.
Yeah.
But I noticed that if you talk to people that had their own kinds of adventures,
Mhm.
then their questions are different. Their questions are very interesting. Like if I'm talking to sailors that have
Uh-huh.
to, that do weeks long
Right.
passages. When I had an amazing conversation with a Marine that he has been to war many times.
Mhm.
He's one of the most, or maybe the most deployed Marine ever. And so he spent like half of his life in war
Mm.
areas. Uh, his questions were so to the point, so interesting.
Yeah.
He was asking, "How do you recover about this? How do you rest?" Uh, and also, when he asked the question, you could tell that he wanted the answer.
Right.
He wasn't just filling up the space,
Yeah.
filling up the silence. No, he really wanted to know.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to compare with
Mhm.
what he knew.
Right. Yeah. I had an experience like that in Florida on the Florida Trail towards the end of the second walk. And over at the 88 store over in the Ocala Forest, I met a guy who was an Army Ranger. And, he'd seen a lot of blood and guts and stuff. And he basically, he's been a thru hiker for, I think, 10 years. And he got into hiking to walk the war off and just kept going, and then eventually got a job as a guide. But our conversations were not to the extent of, oh, what did you see and and what was this like? But it was more like the interpersonal stuff that we got it. And we were just kind of in tune with talking other things that were like, oh yeah, that's just a normal thing.
Yeah, yeah. those conversations can be fantastic, and I think that they are even better when the experience of the other person is different than yours, but also very intense. So you know that it is transformational for sure.
Yeah.
And then you get interested in the details. You want to know about them as well. But I want to ask you about something, but I need to tell you a little story first.
Okay.
In 2016, I went to Spain. And I decided to do El Camino de Santiago. I wasn't sure, or I didn't determine if I wanted to do the entire thing, but I thought I want to do part of it, at least part of it, and see how it feels. So I decided, okay, I'll do at least 2 weeks, and then I'll decide. So it was 2016, and I was very aware that pilgrimage, I was doing El Camino Frances, and that is a 3,000-year-old pilgrimage. They have all these stories about it, and it's a path where they see the pilgrims every day in quantities, and so it's very normal for them. They have a vocabulary for that. They call you peregrinos, and you go to the little restaurants, and they have a menu specific for you. And there are all these places where you can stay, some of them for free. It in that sense, it was an amazing story, and I was inspired by the movie The Way. And I think the movie is very, very realistic in showing how things happen in El Camino. However, I was thinking that would be such a great opportunity to talk about life and religion and philosophy and the meaning of everything. It's you have hours and hours every day with fellow pilgrims, and the conversations can be fantastic. And when I got there, in the reality of it, people wanted to talk about two things: Brexit and the World Cup. That's it. It's Brexit and because it was exactly when Brexit was voted or that was or it hit the news.
Right.
And I had to keep asking people, say, can we talk about something else? Like, can we talk about anything significant, right? And to me, that was a disappointment. At some point, I discovered, I was there for 2 weeks. I went all the way to Burgos. And I only found one person to talk to that we had meaningful, interesting conversations. The way it happened was like this. He would walk faster than I did. So usually I started earlier because I like to start in the dark. And at some point he would pass me by. And then for that 1 minute that we were together, we would ask each other questions. We would think of very interesting things to talk about. And then for a while, he would stop sometimes and wait for me, or we would stop for a coffee somewhere. So usually he stopped at first, and then we continued that conversation. So we would be interrupting the conversation and continuing every few hours, right? And then after I arrived, we would choose where we were going to stay. So he would get, because he got early, usually he could find a hostel that was for free and it was good, and he would get the space for two people. And then we continued the conversation. So it was more or less like playing chess by mail, in which I ask you a question and you have the next 2 hours to think about the answer. So we can ask the most deep and difficult questions. Unfortunately, I only met him during my second week there. And so we could do that for like 4 or 5 days, and then I was gone. Did you find in all your travels, did you find opportunities to have really great conversations with people? And how was that? What can you remember of it?
Both of my walks were pretty solitary. Now I would come across people from time to time, but it would be a minority of cases where there would be enough time with people to be able to talk like that. So I can probably count on one hand the number of times I was able to have conversations with people like that.
In nearly a year and a half.
Well, yeah, almost 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, in almost 2 years, you only had a handful of opportunities.
Right. Yeah. Because, again, the nature of my walks were just, I was just going through places and onward I would go. And so I would just happenstance be coming across people from time to time. And most of those times, those people are just in their everyday thing. They could have been out at a convenience store. They could have been out on a trail in the forest doing their own thing, but going the other way. It could have been just somebody who saw me on the road and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" Now, I would say the longest conversation I ever had like that was again towards the end of my first trip, was with a sheriff's deputy in southern Georgia on New Year's Day, and he stopped. He was stopped on the road and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" Told him what I was doing. He said, "Well, here, pull over." And we talked almost 2 hours on the side of the road there.
Yeah. So here, to me, the most interesting aspect starts to surface in this conversation, and here comes philosophy and religion and politics and everything else. What were you thinking about? What occupied your mind mostly?
I think my mind a lot of times was in subconscious mode thinking. And then after whatever it was thinking about was done thinking, then would come to the forefront. And so for me, that reflection a lot was on what is love, the meaning of love, how to live love, and how to live life, and how to lose self as opposed to be in self. And then on the second walk, I think is basically where all that stuff really came together and gelled to the point where I have now, I've gotten rid of everything. And in fact, I'm getting ready to drive back to California and just get rid of all the stuff that I have in a little 5x5 storage that I kept before I left. And I bought an ambulance, and I'll be living in an ambulance, and then just doing whatever it is that God has me do. So,
so are you going to be traveling in the ambulance, maybe, or it's like a vehicle that you modify so you can live in it?
Yeah, I just got it about a week and a half ago, and so I'll do. It's got cabinets and stuff in it. I'll do a few more modifications, put a bed, a sink, maybe a shower or something in there, and a bathroom perhaps, and then just do my thing and live the van life, and maybe do hikes, here and there, instead of through hikes, but. Yeah, so these two hikes have allowed me to just gel that all in my head and finally jettison the old life and with trust take on the new life. Now, I had to do that sort of at the beginning of the first walk, because the beginning of the first walk was really a leap of faith, because I sold my condo, gave away my furniture and most of my stuff. And what little stuff I kept, like I said, I put in a 5x5 storage. So it was basically, I was cutting the cord then, but I still was a little topsy-turvy with that. And so that first walk gave me time to get comfortable with that. And the second walk gave me time to really live in that.
This is so interesting. The only part that I regret is that we don't have enough time that I could think about what you just told me for an hour before I come up with the next question or the next comment. Because I love these kinds of stories and conversations. That's a passion of mine.
Well, it comes, again, what I found is it comes to just living in the moment. And when you're living in the moment, you are not worrying about what's going to be or not be in the future. You're not thinking about that bad person or that good person. You're not thinking about politics. You're not thinking about the personality of the person that you just passed or somebody from your past. You're just living in the moment. And for me anyway, living in the moment, you're living in God. And by living in God, you're also living in love. And when you're living in love, you're looking at all people as your brothers and sisters. And as hard as that may be, we all have our own personalities and our quirks. But for me, as I truly have gelled this in my mind on this second walk, is that by living in love, I'm living in a sense of trying to really listen what God's will is for my life and not trying to rebel against that or trying to decide, well, no, I want to do this. And then just listen to that still small voice and then do whatever that still small voice is, because when you're living in love and living in the moment, you're living in eternity. Eternity itself is not this big, long period of time. Eternity itself is the smallest iota of time that you can even begin to conceive and fathom. And once you've gotten to that and you've turned off time, you've entered eternity.
Interestingly, before I did my first walk, I would rarely have or appreciate a conversation like this. And now I do. But I was more of I was more of a classic atheist before, and now I am what some people call a Christian atheist. Okay. Which means it has an interesting explanation, which is, yes, I don't believe in the classic concept of deity, so that part is not there. However, I realized some couple years ago that everybody lives with they have a moral code, which the rules that you live by, right? And they are your morals, your culture, and a bunch of things. And we're not talking yet about laws or anything like that. We're talking about what is the software you have in your head that determines what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do at that moment, right? That is mostly your ethical code, right? I realize that my ethical code, my morals, are a variation of Christian, of Christian code and morals. So a lot of atheists, and I used to be like that, they like to think that the rules they live by are the rules that they chose. It's correct to a certain point, but I realized that I didn't start from a blank page.
Mhm.
I inherited a code of living, a moral code that came from Christianity, Judeo-Christian society, and then I made a few edits to that. I made a few little modifications to it, but most of the very fundamental building blocks of this moral code are Christian,
Mhm.
and that is what a Christian atheist is, right?
Okay.
Uh, and once I realized that, it became so natural and easy to understand and to communicate with people that are more classically religious. But it doesn't matter which religion it is. Like since then, I have amazing conversations with Muslims and with Buddhists, and I like it to think for many years that I was more of a Buddhist.
Oh,
There is some of it still in me, the Zen, a lot of the Zen philosophy. But when I recently examined my moral code, I realized that most of it came from the society where I lived and my family. And I thought, oh, this is 85-90% Christian. you know
mhm.
it's I didn't invent anything new here. So it became not just comfortable to talk about religion with people that are very religious, but also it became pleasant. Now I understand a lot of what we have in common,
Yeah.
and with some of my friends that we venture to talk about these things, I find it refreshing, I would
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
Just the idea that you are not the author of everything you think
Yeah.
is already humbling,
Right.
and makes people quite interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, so I would like to know just a little more about the history of that in you. How did you grow up religiously, and how what shape does it have now?
Yeah. Um, I'll answer backwards. It's very deep within me and very inbred within me. And I grew up in a religious household, and so it was always with me. And it wasn't anything that was forced. It was just, hey, this is the way it is, and going through life, and always, especially later in life, always being able to look and analyze. I've accepted my faith comfortably and confidently,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and that's how I then go ahead in life, moving forward. And that again comes to the two principles when we talk about Christianity. When they asked Jesus, well, what is it that we need to do to be good and all that sort of stuff, and he says you got to love the Lord your God with your heart, mind, and soul, and you got to love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also see in the first letter of John that God is love. So for me and for Christianity itself, in fact, there's a document that was published back in 2005, Deus Caritas Est, God is love.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's really what life is all about, is God is love, and that we live in love, and that in order to live in love, we have to be love itself. And in that essence, then the ultimate in love is giving up of oneself
Mm-hmm.
and doing for others, or doing for God that which is good for others, and that
Mm-hmm.
which is what is good for God.
Yeah,
So,
I find it pretty amazing how I have this kind of talks to people, and even without sharing the most fundamental part of the religion, which is believing in God, I still feel that Of course, that's the only way to go forward. You need to have a loving attitude, and you need to be wanting to love
Right.
everyone. You need to give them this opportunity a priori to be loved. They may do or say things that make me not love them, but that's the imperfect part of my of
Right.
my 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 view. But at least I feel obligated to listen first, and to try to see what is good and interesting on
Yeah.
the people that I meet along the way.
Yeah. And what I found is that when one is talking about love and goodness and ethics and all that,
Mhm.
for me anyway, I feel that there needs to be some sort of set of values, so to speak. And here's how I kind of describe God to people is that when they're trying to find God or trying to understand God or trying to know God, I tell them, well, look, if, as it says in Genesis in the Bible, that God created man in his image and likeness. So if we are created in his image and likeness, and you want to begin to know what God is like or what he's all about, you first have to begin to know yourself and try and understand yourself. And
Mhm.
once you know yourself, or you think you know yourself and understand yourself, then that's when you can begin to understand what God is all about. And the other thing, too, is that, again, going back to the statement of God is love,
Mhm.
if, if indeed God is love, which is what I truly believe, then we would want to always please God because he created us out of love and for love. And therefore, why wouldn't we then, out of love, want to love him back by pleasing and doing what quote unquote daddy wants us to do?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, there is plenty of room for discussion about the nature of truth, and the nature of reality. But there is uh, there is a way of looking to it that I consider pretty sophisticated, that says sometimes there are things that are real, right? And there are things that they are not real in the sense that they don't match reality, the physical reality, or any, they don't meet any reproducible test, or they are not scientific or anything like that, but they are useful. So even though they are not, some ideas, they are not real in the physical world, but they are very useful. So there are rules we live by, and some methods that people know they are not true, but they are useful. So I'll give you a very practical, very mundane example, which is if you go to any training using firearms,
Mhm.
if you are absolutely any training, they will teach you that before you hand a firearm to someone else, that first of all, you always presume the firearm is loaded. But before you hand it to someone else, you unload it, and that is a proper way to do it.
Mhm.
And then you open the chamber so you can show the person that
That
it's empty, right? So that's this. There are several steps that you
Mhm.
do always the same way, and you
Right.
show that it's unloaded. So I hand it to you. When you get it, you actually check if it is unloaded, and you open it again.
Yeah.
So not just you start with the same presumption, but you go to the same steps. But by any rational way, if I ask you, did you know that it was unloaded when I gave it to you? The answer is yes. You knew it was loaded, but you still go through now the ritual of checking it again, because having that redundancy of safety has it creates an advantage, an advantage in which both of us survive the possibility of an accident by following a rule that we know is not rational. In the physical world, it's not rational, but it's a method that has an advantage for both of us. There are a lot of philosophies and ideas like that. Some of them are more evidently advantageous, but some of them are not. And I think that one of those that we could consider is the idea of having more than one life, or the idea of how they call reincarnation, right? Which in principle I find it simplistic and kind of silly. But I read a little essay called "The Egg," written by Andy Weir, and in the egg, it's just like a page long, but it starts with you realizing that you died. You realize that, oh, I died. I was driving my car. Now I'm here, and that is nothing. And then you meet God, right? And then through the story, and I put a link on the description so people can read that. It's pretty gorgeous. But the idea that he introduced on that text is by absolutely doesn't match reality at all. But he suggests that God said that he's going to send you back. You say, oh, like reincarnated? Say, yeah, more or less. But who am I going to be? Oh, this time you're going to be a Chinese girl in the year whatever. He said, oh, but so you're sending me back in time. He said, yeah, why not? Oh, but that means that if I can be sent, to the past, I could meet myself. He said, but you always do. He said, I'm going to meet with me. He said, there is no one else. There is only you. You are every person that you meet. So when you treat them with kindness, you're treating yourself with kindness. If you treat them with hate, you are the one at the same time, you're the one being treated with hate. He says, oh, I could be Hitler. Said, yeah, you are Hitler. You are also everyone that he killed. You were the person doing the good, and you were the person doing the bad. And Joe Rogan has a philosophy more or less like that too. He says that just presume and feel as if you are everyone, that there is only you, right? And then think of, so I'm going to treat this person with the best, anyone that I meet, with the best level of respect and kindness and patience that I can put together, and do that to all of them.
Right. I mean, that's again, if you look at if God is love, how do you measure love? How do you see, touch, feel, taste it? And in a sense, if we all are created by God, we are created by love, we are created in love, and therefore how we act, how we interact, we are acting and interacting within love itself. And so to kind of touch upon your examples, I suppose you could say that if person A is a bad person and has murdered 40 million people or caused the deaths of 40 million people like Stalin or Hitler or whatever, you can say that perhaps that's a reflection of ourselves in a sense, because the actions that we ourselves do does have an impact on the world itself.
Mm-hmm.
So if we decide to act in a positive and loving manner, we can be that pebble of love that gets thrown into the pond and causes the ripples that then affect each other in a loving and positive way. And the same way as if we act in a hateful or evil way, we can be that rock of hate that gets thrown into the pond and causes those same type of ripples.
Yeah.
So, but what I would say, though, is that I don't necessarily agree that we are everyone, because then that strips out the individuality that each of us is.
Which is a on the very foundation of Christian values, is the respect for individuality. You know, because there is an understanding. I'm going to botch the words now, but there is an understanding that the divinity is putting you as an individual. You know, so you are that is a lot of talk about you being the son of God. There is no talk at all about you being just the part of this group that they are. No, there is very little in terms of treating you as part of a group, and there is a lot about treating you as an individual, and you responding and you acting as an individual. And I love that, because to me that's the best foundation is individual. You know,
and to use the Christological references, is that we are individuals, but we are members of the body of Christ. And so as individuals, each of us has our own traits, our own personalities, just like in the body, each member has its own traits and methods for doing whatever it is. You know, an eye is an eye, and an elbow is an elbow, and all that. And so an eye can't be an elbow, and an elbow can't be a knee, and a stomach can't be a heart, and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the allegory to use, is that we are all individuals, but we are all part of one.
I think it would be very, very pleasant experience if we ever met on a trail. And we kept talking, and without a set speed to walk or a set speed to talk. And when we create this opportunity, it's fantastic. But now I have another thing in mind, that if someone is watching this podcast this far, that means that person really likes at least one of us, because they are into it for more than a year, for more than an hour. That person is listening, and it's quite likely that person is interested in doing something unusual, like walking or running across America, or doing some other kind of adventure, right? So what would be the most fundamental technical knowledge or recommendation, or something that you wouldn't want them to miss the opportunity to tell that person? If you're going to do something that crazy, keep this in mind. What comes to mind?
Live in the moment and know what and why you're wanting to do what, and then do it, and don't look back. That's basically it. Don't second guess yourself. If you truly know whether it's a calling or whether it's something that you truly want to do, just do it, but live in the moment doing it. Don't look forward, don't look back, but just be in the moment, in this place, right here, right now. And also I would hasten to add is that don't get too wrapped up in too much, the paralysis of analysis. Do whatever basic preparation you need to do, but don't let the preparation itself then bog you down and keep you from doing it. Just go do it.
How old were you when you did it the first time?
How old was I? 59 is when I started, yeah.
Did you, when I was doing it the first time, at that time, I wished I did it sooner, but not much sooner. I think that if I did something like it when I was in my 20s, most of the experience would get lost, would be wasted on. That is a funny quote that is that youth is wasted on the young. Right. So yeah, I think a lot of it would be wasted. But so I'm happy that I did it when I was older, while it's still young enough to, not so old that my body was failing on me, but not too young. And that's in terms of general advice. What I tell people is that if you are a little older and you are doubting that you can do it because of your age, I think that that's usually an incorrect idea, because a lot of the people that got the most benefit and that really enjoyed it the most, they are in their 50s and 60s, some of them in their 40s, but most of them are in their 50s.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that want to do something like this, they always have the dream, but they don't know if they can live that dream because of whatever responsibilities or tie downs they may have collected through life. Now, for somebody like me who has no attachments, I have no family, it was an easy thing. For somebody else that might have, say, a wife or a husband or a career and no savings, and it could be a scary thing.
Yeah.
But doing something like this and then continuing onwards in life to do something like this doesn't really cost a whole lot of money. And it can be physically demanding at times, but and it can be emotionally or psychologically demanding, but it can be done, and it is fulfilling, especially with the right mindset. And again, for me anyway, the mindset of being in the moment, in the place, right here, right now, and letting the experience come and not trying to direct the experience. And for me, then I think then that's where faith comes in, because if somebody, again, in my thinking, if somebody doesn't have some sort of faith, then something like this and continuing something like this over the years is going to be maybe directionless or empty, or I don't know.
I agree with you. Not if faith fits very well into a space that if you don't have the faith, you have to fill that space with something else. And in my case, it was goal-oriented. I had some challenge in mind in the beginning, something that I wanted to do with that run. And then that kept me going, all the way through. In that case, it was that I wanted to change certain aspects of my life. And I thought the only way to do it will be to measure myself against something that is so big that I can't be sure that I'll finish. That I'll have to commit completely to it and grow into the person that will be able to do it. So that I knew that the me that ends the run is not going to be the same one that started. I knew the person that started I would shed that old person along the way. And sometimes people are very are curious about it, and they are considering doing something like it. They may be talking still in vague terms because they don't know exactly what they want to do. Right. But when they say a phrase that usually comes through is, oh, I could never run across America.
Oh yeah.
And I ask, how many times have you tried?
Yeah.
How can you know?
Yeah, and that's why I always come back to, as I mentioned earlier, when people say, "Oh, that's a really big thing you did twice," and I said, "No, it's not big at all. It's just one step at a time, one moment at a time."
Yeah.
So, getting back to the advice as to somebody thinking of doing something like this, it's not a big deal, really. It's just a series of single steps, single moments.
Mhm.
Number one, and then touching on something that you did talk about. Number two is if they do have these, say, familial attachments, whether it's a wife, a husband, kids, job, whatever, and they've been thinking of doing this, it's okay to think of doing it and discuss it with your spouse, right? Because the spouse is your partner, and it could be a very enriching thing for both of you, even if only one of you does this. But talk it out like two loving people, and then go and do it.
Earlier you said that some people have a lot of connection. They are connected to a lot of things. They have obligations, job, work, mortgage, and things they need to do. To me, that's scary too.
Well, yeah, you look. There's a lot of fear out there in the world.
Yeah, having a common life that you are attached to too many things.
Yeah.
Like I was at some point, I was, married, and I had this house, and and the two cars, and the mortgages, and and business, and a lot of stuff. And in the middle of that, I doubt that I would be able to stop it, to pause my life, to do anything significant. And I end up doing, but it had to be things that were significant but took shorter periods, like a week, or or shorter things.
Right.
Even today, without having much attachment, I just don't feel inspired to do anything that lasts too many weeks.
Yeah.
Other than the one project that I'm working, that is multi-year project, which is business, more or less business related. But having a house, for instance, doesn't attract me anymore.
Yeah, and for some people that are thinking of doing something like this, whether it's over a number of months, a number of weeks, or 2 weeks in your pilgrimage example, a lot of the hesitation comes down to fear. And it's the fear of, for some people, it's the fear of loss of stuff or things or friends or people or whatever. And for some people, of course, it's the fear of pain, suffering, or death. And we all know that death is going to come. And what's the ultimate? The ultimate in death, for me anyway, the ultimate in death is actually you're gaining eternal life. But a lot of people look on death as this final thing.
Like me, that my view is that you turn off the light. That's it.
No, see.
There's nothing else. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have any particular consequence that I find my life being different than yours. I am excited about every day that I have. Every day, the last 24 hours is amazing, because one day your day will have less than 24 hours, and that day may suck, because it may be painful, it may be horrible, it may be some terrible experience. But for now, life is super exciting, and
just live life one day at a time. And
exactly. I like to expose how different apparently our philosophies are, and how compatible we are. I really appreciate having this talk. And if one day we find an opportunity to be on the same trail. I hope it happens.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would like to
Wrap up
talk
there.
about before we close? Is there anything in your mind
No,
that you want to share?
what I'd simply say is that in life, we are made to be able to do what we want to do and to hold back just because of fear. We aren't living life to the fullest. And at the same time, we are meant in life to love. And so if we love life and we love what we do and we do what we love, then that's what life is all about. And go through life without fearing and always loving. And then you can do amazing things, whether that amazing thing is a step by step of 6,000 miles across the country twice, or in your case, whatever, how many you've done, or whatever. I mean, you can do what you put your mind to it, but do it in love. And then with love, there will never be any fear.
I think that is no possible way to end this than what you just said. So thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for doing this and to sharing your view. And I hope you keep in touch, and our paths will cross one day.
And if I might put in a plug, if anybody wants to follow my videos, just go to ilikemike.com and you got all the videos right there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think this podcast is a great success. I appreciate that.
All right. See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.